The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Ambassador David Walsh kept sipping it anyway. The bitter taste matched his mood as he watched the holographic displays floating above the conference table. 3 months of careful preparation, and everything was falling apart in real time. Meridian Point Station hummed with activity around them. The massive structure hung in neutral space between 3 star systems, built specifically for moments like this, when civilizations couldn't trust each other enough to meet on anyone's home territory. They came here. The walls were lined with translators, mediators, and enough security to stop a small war from breaking out in the corridors. Today, it might not be enough. Walsh adjusted his collar and glanced at his team. Colonel Amy Rivers sat perfectly still in her dress uniform, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. She had fought in the border wars 10 years ago and knew what real conflict looked like. Dr. Tom Bradley was busy with his tablet, probably, running another analysis of alien psychology patterns. The man never stopped thinking. Across the curved table, the Keth delegation made no effort to hide their contempt. War Prince Thek stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide bearing ritual scars that marked him as a veteran of dozens of campaigns. His species had conquered half the sector through sheer brutality, and they were proud of it. The smaller aliens flanking him kept their 4 eyes focused on data pads, occasionally chittering in their clicking language. The Varan Collective had sent their best diplomats, but even they looked nervous. Their blue-tinged skin had taken on a darker shade since the talks began, a sure sign of stress among their kind. They knew as well as anyone that failure here meant their worlds would burn within the year. Walsh had read the files. The war between the Keth Empire and the Varan Collective had already claimed 6 billion lives across 40 worlds. Both sides were exhausted, their economies strained to the breaking point. This should have been easy. Find common ground, establish boundaries, create a framework for peace. Basic diplomacy. But the Keth hadn't come here to make peace. They had come to demonstrate their superiority. The humans speak of compromise. War Prince Thek's voice rumbled through the chamber's speakers. The translation system struggled with the low frequencies. What do children know of war? Walsh kept his expression neutral. We know that continued conflict serves no one's interests. Both your civilizations have paid a terrible price for this war. Thek's laugh sounded like grinding metal. Price? We have grown stronger with each victory. The Vorans flee before our fleets like prey animals. Soon we will need new hunting grounds. The threat was subtle but clear. Dr. Bradley looked up from his tablet, catching Walsh's eye for just a moment. The xenobiologist had been studying Keth culture for months, and his reports painted a disturbing picture. This wasn't just about territory or resources. For the Keth, warfare was a biological imperative. Surely there are uninhabited systems that could serve your expansion needs, Walsh suggested carefully. The galaxy is vast enough for all our peoples to prosper. Uninhabited worlds are boring, one of the smaller Keth delegates clicked. No sport in conquering empty rocks. The Varan ambassador made a sound like steam escaping. Her translator rendered it as distress, but Walsh suspected it was closer to rage. He couldn't blame her. Perhaps we should focus on specific territorial boundaries, Walsh tried again. If we could establish clear zones of influence, zones. Thek interrupted. The only zone that matters is the hunting ground. Everything else is merely waiting to be conquered. The holographic display shifted, showing stellar maps with proposed boundaries. Each revision had been carefully crafted to give both sides something they needed while avoiding the most contentious systems. Months of work by the galaxy's best diplomatic minds. Thek waved a clawed hand, and the display changed. New images appeared above the table. Burning stations. Shattered hulls floating in space. Bodies in environmental suits, frozen in the vacuum. Walsh recognized the uniforms immediately. Human. The research station at Kepler Prime had gone dark 3 months ago. Now he knew why. "We encountered some of your people recently," Thek said, his voice carrying what might have been amusement. "They were studying gas giant atmospheric patterns, very dedicated. They kept working even after we began bombardment. The images were horrifically detailed. 347 researchers, engineers, and support staff. Walsh had attended the memorial service for them, had spoken to their families. They had been scientists, not soldiers, civilians engaged in pure research with no military value whatsoever." "That was a neutral research facility," Walsh said quietly. "Nothing is neutral," Thek replied. "There are only predators and prey. Your species will learn this soon enough." Colonel Rivers shifted in her seat. Walsh could practically feel the anger radiating from her. The woman had lost friends at Kepler Prime, but she remained silent, following protocol. "Are you threatening human colonies?" Walsh asked. "I am explaining reality," Thek said. "When we finish with the Vorans, we will need new territories. Human worlds have good climates. Your people breed quickly. They will make excellent stock for our combat arenas." The casual mention of slavery sent a chill through the room. Even the Voran delegates looked shocked. The Keth weren't just threatening conquest. They were talking about turning humanity into entertainment. Dr. Bradley was typing rapidly on his tablet now. His fingers moved with the quick precision of someone encoding an urgent message. Walsh had worked with the man for 5 years and had never seen him look so focused. "I think these negotiations have concluded," Walsh said, standing slowly. "It appears we have nothing more to discuss." "Run back to your little worlds," Thek called after them. "Tell your leaders what awaits them. Perhaps they will surrender without forcing us to hunt them down." The human delegation filed out of the conference chamber in silence. Other species watched them go, some with sympathy, others with the calculating look of predators sizing up. Potential victims. Word would spread quickly through the station's diplomatic quarters. Humanity had been publicly humiliated and threatened with extinction. Only when they reached their private quarters did Dr. Bradley speak. "Message sent," he said simply. Walsh nodded. The coded transmission would reach Earth within hours through quantum communication channels. 3 simple words that would change everything. Pattern read. Full disclosure authorized. For 50 years, humanity had played the role of peaceful newcomers to galactic civilization. They had traded honestly, negotiated fairly, and respected the established order. They had been the perfect galactic citizens. The Keth had just reminded them why that was a luxury they couldn't afford. Outside their quarters, Meridian Point continued its ancient function as a neutral meeting ground, but neutrality, as War Prince Thek had pointed out, was an illusion. There were only predators and prey. The Keth Empire was about to discover which category humanity really belonged to. The emergency alert reached President Maria Santos while she was having breakfast with her granddaughter. The 8-year-old was explaining her school project about friendly aliens when the secure phone buzzed 3 times. That particular pattern meant only one thing: humanity's survival was at stake. 20 minutes later, Santos sat in the Global Defense Council's underground command center, 300 meters beneath the Swiss Alps. The room had been built during the early days of human space exploration, when first contact protocols were just theoretical exercises. Now those theories were about to be tested in the worst possible way. Pattern Red confirmed. Director James Park of Terran Intelligence announced to the assembled world leaders. Dr. Bradley's message came through quantum channels 47 minutes ago. The Keth Empire has officially declared their intention to invade human space. The holographic displays around the room showed real-time intelligence feeds from across the galaxy. Merchant ships reporting unusual Keth fleet movements, diplomatic stations buzzing with rumors, colonial governors requesting guidance on evacuation procedures. Santos had seen similar displays during the resource wars of the 2150s, but this was different. Humanity was no longer fighting other humans over asteroid mining rights. They were facing extinction at the hands of a species that viewed them as livestock. "How long do we have?" asked Chancellor Roberts of the European Federation. "Our best estimate suggests 6 months before they can mount a full invasion," Park replied. "Their fleet movements indicate they're still focused on finishing their war with the Vorans first." 6 months to prepare for a war against an empire that controls 300 star systems, muttered Prime Minister Joe. "That's not much time." Santos watched the data streams flowing across the displays. Population centers, defensive installations, fleet positions. Everything looked so vulnerable when viewed from this perspective. Humanity had 63 colonies scattered across 41 star systems, most of them lightly defended farming or mining worlds. Against the Keth war machine, they looked like scattered sheep waiting for wolves. "Tell them," Santos said quietly. The room fell silent. Every leader present knew what those 2 words meant. For 5 decades, they had maintained the greatest secret in human history. Today, that secret would finally be revealed. Director Park activated a new set of displays. The familiar star charts disappeared, replaced by something far more complex. Fleet positions that didn't match official records, defensive installations that weren't supposed to exist, industrial capacity figures that were triple the published numbers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Park began, "what you're about to learn is classified at Omega Black level. The penalty for unauthorized disclosure is life imprisonment, but given current circumstances, full disclosure is authorized." The first revelation hit like a physical blow. The merchant vessel Prosperity, currently docked at Haven's Rest Colony, wasn't carrying grain shipments. The innocent-looking cargo hauler was actually a heavy cruiser disguised with false hull plating and fake registration codes. Its crew of civilian traders were experienced military officers operating under deep cover. Captain Mike Rodriguez had been running trade routes for 5 years, building relationships with colonial administrators and mapping defensive positions. His ship's cargo holds contained enough firepower to level a city, all hidden behind carefully constructed facades. "How many ships?" asked Chancellor Roberts, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Ghost Fleet consists of 437 vessels," Park replied. "Officially, they don't exist. The crews are volunteers who have been declared legally dead. They've been operating throughout the galaxy for the past 15 years, gathering intelligence and positioning themselves for exactly this scenario." The revelations kept coming. Colonial Administrator Lisa Chen of New Perth wasn't just managing agricultural output. She was actually Admiral Chen, commanding officer of the sector's hidden military forces. The farming equipment scattered across her world could transform into mobile defense platforms within minutes. Mining operations throughout human space were actually military manufacturing facilities. The rare Earth elements being extracted weren't going to electronics companies on Earth. They were feeding weapons programs that the galaxy had never seen. "Dr. Bradley has been busy," Park continued, bringing up biological data charts. "Every alien species we've encountered has been thoroughly analyzed. We have detailed profiles of their physiology, psychology, and potential weaknesses. If necessary, we can deploy species-specific biological agents." President Santos watched the faces around the table as the scope of humanity's deception became clear. Fear mixed with amazement as world leaders realized their species had been preparing for galactic war since before most of them were born. "The research station at Kepler Prime," Park said, his voice becoming hard. "Those scientists weren't just studying gas giants. They were part of our early warning network. Their data helped us identify Keth fleet movements 3 months before they attacked." The display showed the final transmission from Kepler Prime. Even while under bombardment, the researchers had continued sending tactical information about Keth weapons and defensive systems. Their sacrifice had provided crucial intelligence about enemy capabilities. "What about our colonies?" asked Prime Minister Joe. "The Keth think they're easy targets." Park smiled for the first time since the briefing began. Haven's Rest colony has a population of 2 million farmers. What the Keth don't know is that every adult on that world has received combat training. Their farming equipment includes hidden weapons systems. The orbital grain silos are actually missile platforms. The pattern was the same throughout human space. Peaceful colonies were actually fortified military bases. Research stations doubled as sensor networks and weapon platforms. Even the diplomatic missions had been gathering intelligence while maintaining their cover as harmless bureaucrats. "How long have we been planning this?" asked Chancellor Roberts. "Since first contact 53 years ago," Santos replied. "The previous administration realized that humanity would eventually face a threat like this. We've been preparing ever since." The room filled with the soft hum of quantum processors as the world leaders absorbed the implications. Humanity hadn't been naive newcomers stumbling through galactic politics. They had been playing a game of chess while their opponents thought they were watching children with toy blocks. "What are our orders?" asked General Williams of the African Defense Force. Santos stood, looking at each face around the table. These men and women represented 4 billion people scattered across dozens of worlds. The decisions made in this room would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or became extinct. "Activate all Ghost Fleet assets," she said. "Begin Phase 2 of the Prometheus Protocol and send a message to Ambassador Walsh." "What message?" Park asked. "Tell him the gloves are off." Across the galaxy, coded transmissions began flowing through quantum communication networks. On 41 worlds, colonial administrators received new orders that transformed their peaceful settlements into military strongholds. In deep space, merchant vessels shed their disguises and revealed their true nature as warships. The Keth Empire had awakened something they didn't understand. For 50 years, humanity had been the galaxy's most trusted species. Reliable traders, skilled diplomats, curious scientists. Everyone knew humans were peaceful, helpful, and completely harmless. Everyone was wrong. On Meridian Point Station, Dr. Bradley finished encoding another message. This one would reach every human facility in the galaxy simultaneously. 3 words that would activate sleeper agents, hidden weapons, and contingency plans that had been decades in the making. The message was simple. The hunt begins. 3 months after the failed negotiations, War Prince Thek stood on the command deck of his flagship Bone Crusher and watched the peaceful blue world of Haven's Rest grow larger on the main display. Intelligence reports showed 2 million human. Farmers living simple lives, growing crops and raising livestock. No military installations, no orbital defenses, no warships in the system. It would be perfect for what the Keth had planned. "Begin scanning protocols," Thek ordered his subordinates. "I want to know every detail about this world before we claim it." The 40 ships of his battle fleet spread out in standard attack formation. Each vessel carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, but today they wouldn't need such extreme measures. The humans would surrender once they understood the futility of resistance. Then the real fun would begin. Haven's Rest had good climate zones and plenty of open space. The human population would provide excellent breeding stock for the combat. Arenas back home. Thek had already selected several candidates from the orbital surveillance feeds, young, healthy specimens that would put up entertaining fights before dying for the crowd's amusement. "Unusual readings," War Prince reported. "Scanner cast Grick, one of the smaller Keth manning the sensor stations. The orbital satellites appear to be agricultural monitoring platforms, but their power signatures are inconsistent with standard farming equipment." Thek barely listened. Human technology was primitive compared to Keth military hardware. Whatever. Minor inconsistencies the scanners detected were irrelevant. Probably just inefficient human engineering. "Commence orbital bombardment of the capital city," he ordered. "Nothing too destructive. We want to preserve the infrastructure and population." Centers. The flagship's main guns began charging with their characteristic whine. Around the fleet, other warships prepared their own weapons. It would be a brief demonstration of superior firepower, followed by demands for unconditional surrender. Standard. Keth doctrine for dealing with inferior species. Then everything went wrong at once. The agricultural satellites that had been peacefully monitoring crop growth suddenly unfolded like deadly flowers. Hidden panels retracted to reveal missile tubes, particle beam arrays, and targeting systems that immediately locked onto the Keth fleet. The power readings that scanner-cast Grick had noted spiked to military-grade levels. Impossible. Theki snarled. Those are farming satellites. On the planet's surface, the grain silos that dotted the landscape began opening their metal caps. Instead of stored wheat and corn, they revealed surface-to-orbit missile batteries that swiveled toward the sky with mechanical precision. The peaceful farming equipment scattered across the continents transformed before their eyes, tractors unfolding into mobile weapons platforms and irrigation systems revealing themselves as disguised defense networks. But the real surprise came from the merchant vessel Prosperity, which had been quietly hauling cargo shipments between colonies for the past 5 years. The unremarkable freighter suddenly jettisoned its outer hull plating in a series of controlled explosions. Beneath the civilian disguise lay a sleek predator bristling with weapons that no Keth database contained. Captain Mike Rodriguez sat in his real command chair for the first time in half a decade. The bridge of the heavy cruiser Retribution bore no resemblance to the cramped merchant vessel cockpit he had been pretending to operate. Advanced holographic displays showed targeting, solutions for every enemy ship, while his crew of supposed civilian traders revealed themselves as some of humanity's most experienced naval officers. "All stations report ready, Captain," announced his tactical officer. "Shall we introduce ourselves?" Rodriguez smiled. "Light them up." The space around Haven's Rest erupted in controlled violence. Humanity's hidden weapons revealed technologies that the galaxy had never seen. Particle beams that ignored Keth energy shields struck hull armor with surgical precision. Kinetic bombardment rounds accelerated to near light speed, punched through defensive plating like bullets through paper. Targeted electromagnetic pulses disabled enemy electronics while leaving life support systems intact. The Keth fleet, expecting to face helpless farmers, instead found themselves fighting a military force that had been preparing for this exact scenario for decades. Their own weapons, designed for intimidation and overwhelming firepower, seemed clumsy and inefficient compared to the precise instruments of destruction that humanity deployed. "Shields failing," scanner-cast Grick reported from his station. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Their weapons are penetrating our armor." Thek watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were winning, decisively. The Keth warship Skull Splitter exploded in a brilliant flash as human missiles found its ammunition stores. The heavy cruiser Blood Drinker listed helplessly as electromagnetic pulses fried its computer systems. Ship after ship fell to weapons that shouldn't exist, wielded by a species that was supposed to be helpless. "Retreat," Thek finally ordered. "All ships withdraw to hyperspace." But even retreat was denied to them. The human weapons had been designed not just to destroy, but to capture. Carefully placed shots disabled hyperspace engines while leaving life support intact. Ships that tried to flee found themselves helpless, drifting in space while human boarding parties prepared to take them intact. In 37 minutes, the most powerful Keth battle fleet ever assembled had been reduced to wreckage and prisoners. Only Thek's flagship remained partially operational, its engines damaged but not destroyed. Captain Rodriguez materialized on the Bone Crusher's command deck, along with a squad of human Marines. The teleportation technology that brought them there was another secret humanity had kept hidden. No other species in the galaxy possessed personal matter transportation systems. Thek stared at the human officer in disbelief. This was supposed to be a race of peaceful farmers and harmless merchants. The man standing before him wore the uniform of a military that wasn't supposed to exist, surrounded by soldiers carrying weapons that fired bullets of coherent energy. "War Prince Thek," Rodriguez said politely. "I believe we need to talk." "How?" Thek demanded. "Your species is primitive. We studied your capabilities. You have no military technology." Rodriguez looked around the ruined command deck, noting the bodies of Keth warriors who had died trying to resist his boarding party. "You studied what we wanted you to see. We've been watching you for 5 years, learning your tactics, analyzing your weaknesses, preparing for this moment. But you're merchants, diplomats, farmers. We're survivors," Rodriguez corrected. "And you just made the biggest mistake in galactic history." He gestured to the tactical displays still functioning on the Keth bridge. They showed the aftermath of the battle. Human ships were already securing prisoners and salvaging technology. Medical teams were providing aid to wounded Keth soldiers, demonstrating the same care they would show their own people. "You see, War Prince, you made one fundamental error in your calculations," Rodriguez continued. "You assumed that because we preferred peace, we were incapable of war. You mistook restraint for weakness." The communications system crackled to life, broadcasting a message that would be heard throughout Keth space. Ambassador Walsh's voice, calm and diplomatic as always, delivered words that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. "To the leadership of the Keth Empire," Walsh began, "your fleet has been neutralized with minimal casualties. Your war prince is our prisoner, but he will be treated according to civilized standards of warfare. We extend this same courtesy to all Keth personnel in our custody." Rodriguez saw understanding dawn in Thek's alien features. The humans weren't just superior warriors. They were honorable ones. Even after being threatened with slavery and extinction, they were offering mercy to defeated enemies. "We have no desire for conquest or revenge," Walsh continued. "But we will not tolerate threats to human civilians. Any further acts of aggression against our colonies will be met with appropriate force." Thek looked at the human captain with something approaching respect. His species had dominated the galaxy through superior firepower and ruthless tactics, but the humans had defeated them through superior planning and moral strength. "What happens now?" Thek asked. Rodriguez helped the wounded war prince to his feet with surprising gentleness. "Now you get to explain to your people why attacking the most lethal species in the galaxy was such a bad idea." On Haven's Rest, the 2 million farmers were already returning to their daily routines. The hidden weapons folded back into their disguises, the orbital platforms resumed their agricultural monitoring duties, and the tractors went back to tilling fields. To any outside observer, it would look like nothing had happened. But across the galaxy, intelligence networks were buzzing with impossible reports. The peaceful humans had just destroyed a Keth battle fleet without breaking a sweat. The implications would keep military analysts awake for years to come. Rodriguez smiled as he watched Thek being escorted to medical facilities. The war prince would recover from his injuries and eventually return to his people. When he did, he would carry a message that would reshape galactic politics. Humanity was done pretending to be harmless. The news reached the Galactic Council chambers within hours of the battle's end, but nobody believed it at first. A 40-ship Keth battle fleet, one of the most powerful military forces in known space, destroyed by human farmers and a single merchant vessel. The initial reports had to be some kind of mistake. Council member Vesh of the Altarian Republic read the intelligence summary 3 times before accepting that it might be real. Her species had been monitoring galactic conflicts for centuries, and nothing in their extensive databases suggested humans possessed advanced military capabilities. They were traders, diplomats, researchers, helpful but harmless. "Verify these reports immediately," she ordered her intelligence staff. "Contact our sources throughout the sector. I want confirmation from multiple independent witnesses." The confirmations came flooding in. Automated monitoring stations had recorded the entire battle. Neutral merchant vessels in nearby systems had detected the energy signatures of unknown weapons. Even the Keth Empire's own military communications were broadcasting frantic requests for reinforcements and medical aid. Within 12 hours, every major power in the galaxy was conducting emergency reassessments of human capabilities. What they discovered was more terrifying than the battle itself. On the industrial world of Nexus, Trade Minister Korv examined shipping records that his staff had compiled over the past decade. Human merchant vessels had visited their ports thousands of times, always carrying legitimate cargo and conducting honest business. But now, viewed through the lens of military intelligence, patterns emerged that chilled his blood. Every human ship had requested detailed port schematics for safety compliance. Their crews had asked innocent questions about defensive installations, fleet movements, and strategic resources. What had seemed like normal commercial interest now looked like systematic intelligence gathering. "They've been mapping our entire defensive network," Korv reported to the Nexus High Command. "Every trade route, every space station, every strategic choke point in our territory. We thought they were friendly merchants. They were scouts." Similar discoveries were being made throughout the galaxy. The human research expedition to the Spiral Nebula hadn't just been studying stellar phenomena. Their deep space sensors had been monitoring military communications across 6 star systems. The archaeological team exploring ancient ruins on Kepler-7 had actually been analyzing the mineral composition of defensive fortifications. Dr. Helen Parker, the cheerful xenobiologist who had spent 3 years studying local wildlife on the Voran homeworld, turned out to have detailed files on Voran physiology, psychology, and potential biological vulnerabilities. Her research samples included genetic material that could be used to develop species-specific weapons. The Voran High Command called an emergency session as the scope of human intelligence operations became clear. General Tov, veteran of 30 years of warfare against the Keth, struggled to comprehend what his analysts were telling him. "You're saying the humans have biological profiles of every major species in the galaxy?" he asked. "Complete profiles," confirmed Intelligence Director Rask. "Genetic weaknesses, psychological pressure points, physiological limitations. If they wanted to deploy biological warfare against any of us, they already have everything they need." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just been preparing to defend themselves. They had been positioning themselves to fight every potential enemy in the galaxy simultaneously. While other species focused on building bigger ships and more powerful weapons, humans had been studying their opponents with scientific precision. On the neutral trading station Aurora 7, Administrator Quill reviewed decades of human diplomatic interactions. Ambassador Walsh and his team had attended hundreds of meetings, always seeming reasonable and helpful. They had mediated disputes, negotiated trade agreements, and built relationships with species across the political spectrum. Now Quill realized they had been doing something else entirely. Every negotiation had given humans insight into alien decision-making processes. Every cultural exchange had revealed psychological weaknesses. Every friendly conversation had been an intelligence operation. "They know exactly how we think," Quill reported to the station council. "They understand our fears, our motivations, our breaking points. They've been studying us like laboratory specimens." The psychological warfare implications were horrifying. Humans didn't just have superior weapons. They had the knowledge to use those weapons with devastating precision, targeting not just military assets, but the very foundations of alien civilization. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Santos was receiving similar intelligence reports about her own species' activities. For the first time, she was learning the full scope of what humanity had accomplished during 50 years of apparent peaceful expansion. "We have sleeper agents in every major government?" she asked Director Park during a private briefing. "Not agents exactly," Park clarified, More like deep cover specialists. The cultural attaché at the Keth Embassy has been there for 8 years. The trade representative on Altaria is actually one of our best military strategists. They've been gathering intelligence and preparing contingency plans. The reports kept coming. Human tourists had visited every major population center in the galaxy, always with cameras and scanning equipment. Human students had attended alien universities, learning about technology, history, and military doctrine. Human journalists had interviewed political leaders, military officers, and strategic planners. "How many people are involved in this operation?" Santos asked. "Approximately 12,000 active personnel," Park replied, "plus another 30,000 in support roles. We've been running the largest intelligence operation in galactic history, and nobody noticed because they thought we were just being friendly." On the Keth homeworld, Emperor Grek received the first transmission from his defeated war prince with growing disbelief. Thek's report from human captivity painted a picture that contradicted everything the Empire believed about their intended victims. They knew exactly how our fleet would attack, Thek reported via secured quantum channel. Their weapons were specifically designed to counter our shields and armor. They disabled our engines with surgical precision while leaving life support intact. This wasn't luck, Emperor. They've been planning this for decades. The military implications were staggering. Keth battle doctrine, refined through centuries of conquest, had been completely neutralized by an enemy that understood it better than they did themselves. Every tactical advantage the Empire possessed had been analyzed, catalogued, and countered. "What of their numbers?" Emperor Grek demanded. "Surely they cannot have many such vessels." "Unknown, Emperor," Thek replied. "But I suspect we have vastly underestimated their capabilities. The merchant vessel that defeated our fleet was disguised so perfectly that our intelligence services never detected it. How many other ships are hidden among their civilian traffic?" The question haunted military planners throughout Keth space. If humans could disguise heavy cruisers as grain haulers, what else were they hiding? How many of their research stations were actually military bases? How many of their colonies were fortified strongholds? On Meridian Point Station, where the diplomatic crisis had begun, news of the battle spread through the corridors like wildfire. Species that had viewed humans as useful but insignificant suddenly found themselves reassessing every interaction they had ever had with human personnel. The Altarian trade delegation realized that the human merchant who had sold them agricultural equipment the previous month had asked very specific questions about their defensive capabilities. The Nexus research team remembered how interested their human colleagues had been in military communication protocols. The Varan diplomatic staff recalled countless casual conversations with human ambassadors who had seemed genuinely curious about fleet movements and strategic planning. Ambassador Walsh walked through the station's diplomatic quarter with the same calm demeanor he had always maintained. But now other species looked at him differently. The harmless human negotiator was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. A predator who had been hiding among prey for 50 years. "Ambassador," called Council Member Vesh as Walsh passed. "The Altarian Embassy. Perhaps we could discuss recent events." Walsh paused politely. "Of course, Council Member. What would you like to know?" "How long?" she asked simply. "How long have we been preparing for war?" Walsh considered the question carefully. "Since the day we learned we weren't alone in the universe, we hoped for peaceful coexistence, but we planned for the alternative. The honesty was more unsettling than any lie could have been. Humans hadn't been deceiving the galaxy out of malice or ambition. They had been protecting themselves with the thorough planning that their species applied to everything they did." "And now?" Vesh asked. "Now we hope that other species will learn from the Keth Empire's mistake," Walsh replied. "Humans prefer peace, Council Member, but we define the terms of that peace." As Walsh continued his walk through the station, the full scope of humanity's transformation became clear to those watching. The galaxy's most trusted species had revealed themselves as its most dangerous. not through conquest or aggression, but through patient preparation and overwhelming competence. The balance of power had shifted permanently. Humanity was no longer a junior member of galactic civilization asking for acceptance. They were setting the rules for everyone else to follow, and the most terrifying part was that they had been ready to do so all along. 6 months after the destruction of War Prince Thek's fleet, the galaxy had learned to fear a sound that had once seemed harmless, the gentle hum of human starships dropping out of hyperspace. Today, that sound filled the space above the Keth homeworld as Admiral Lisa Chen's ghost fleet materialized like phantoms from the void. Emperor Grek stood on the command deck of his orbital fortress, watching sensor displays that showed impossible readings. 67 human vessels had appeared simultaneously around his capital world, but the energy signatures made no sense. The ships registered as barely warm, almost invisible to thermal sensors, while their hulls seemed to phase in and out of reality. How did they penetrate our defenses? Grek demanded of his military advisors. They didn't penetrate them, Emperor, replied General Mock, his voice hollow with defeat. They bypassed them entirely. Our sensors never detected their approach. Wait, truth was worse than penetration. Human ships possessed stealth technology that made them invisible to every known detection method. They had been moving through Keth space for weeks, positioning themselves for this moment while remaining completely undetected. Begin planetary bombardment, Grek ordered desperately. If we cannot drive them off, we will deny them the prize. But when his gunners attempted to target the human fleet, their weapons refused to respond. Every defensive platform, every orbital cannon, every missile battery remained silent. The control systems that had been upgraded with compatible human technology over the past decade had turned against their masters. Admiral Chen's voice reached the Keth Command Center through communication channels that shouldn't have existed. Her words bypassed every encryption protocol and security barrier as if they weren't there. Emperor Grek, she said calmly, your orbital defenses are under our control. Your fleet is disabled. Your ground forces have been isolated. We suggest you surrender before this becomes more unpleasant for everyone involved. The Emperor stared at his tactical displays in growing horror. Every system his military depended on had been compromised. The computer networks that coordinated their defenses were following human commands instead of Keth orders. Decades of technological cooperation with humanity had turned his own infrastructure into a weapon pointed at his heart. This is impossible, he whispered. We built these systems ourselves. With human technical assistance, Admiral Chen reminded him. Every upgrade, every improvement, every efficiency enhancement came with hidden protocols. We've been preparing for this moment since the day our species first met. On the planet's surface, Keth military commanders watched in helpless rage as their forces found themselves unable to coordinate any response. Communication networks carried only human propaganda broadcasts. Transportation systems refused to move military personnel. Even the lights in their command bunkers flickered to spell out surrender demands in human script. The psychological warfare was devastating. The Keth Empire had built its power on the foundation of superior military technology and ruthless efficiency. Now, they discovered that their enemies had been inside their systems all along, waiting for the right moment to strike. Emperor Grek had one final card to play. Hidden beneath his palace lay the Empire's most classified weapon, a planet-killing device that could crack worlds apart through controlled seismic manipulation. If he couldn't have his homeworld, neither could humanity. But when he attempted to activate the doomsday weapon, nothing happened. The control systems that should have responded to his genetic signature remained dark and silent. Even that, Admiral, Chen said, as if reading his thoughts. Human engineers helped design your bunker's security systems 15 years ago. Did you really think we wouldn't leave ourselves a way in? The completeness of humanity's victory was staggering. They hadn't just defeated the Keth military. They had turned the Empire's own infrastructure against itself while making it look like technological cooperation. Every gift, every assistance, every friendly gesture had been part of a plan so comprehensive that resistance was impossible. Human soldiers materialized in the Emperor's throne room using the same matter transportation, technology that had surprised War Prince Thek months earlier. But these weren't the armored warriors Grek expected. They wore simple uniforms and carried medical supplies alongside their weapons. "Emperor Grek," said Colonel Rivers, removing her helmet to reveal the same professional courtesy she had shown during the failed peace negotiations. "We're here to discuss terms." "Terms?" Grek laughed bitterly. "You control everything. What terms could you possibly offer?" "The same ones we offered your war prince," Rivers replied. "Surrender, accept responsibility for your war crimes, and help us establish a lasting peace. In return, your people will be treated with dignity and respect." The offer was more generous than anything the Keth would have extended to defeated enemies. Throughout their history of conquest, surrender had meant slavery or death. But humanity was proposing something different, rehabilitation rather than revenge. "Why?" Grek asked. "Your species could wipe us out entirely. Why show mercy to those? Who threatened your extinction?" Colonel Rivers considered the question carefully. "Because proving we're the most lethal species in the galaxy was never the point. The point was making sure no one would ever threaten human families again. The distinction was important. Humanity hadn't waged this war for conquest or resources or glory. They had fought to protect their children from species that viewed them as livestock. Now that the threat was neutralized, they had no interest in perpetuating the cycle of violence. News of the Keth homeworld's bloodless capture spread throughout the galaxy within hours. The implications were clear to every species monitoring the situation. Humanity possessed military capabilities that made traditional warfare obsolete. Any civilization that threatened human interests would find their own infrastructure turned against them. But the human response to victory was equally significant. Instead of enslaving the Keth or seizing their territory, humanity began implementing what they called the Restoration Protocol. Keth civilians received humanitarian aid. Damaged infrastructure was repaired using human technology. War criminals faced justice, but ordinary citizens were treated as victims of their own government's aggression. On Meridian Point Station, Ambassador Walsh convened a new peace conference. This time, when alien delegates entered the negotiation chamber, they found the seating arrangements had changed. The circular table that had once suggested equality among species was gone, replaced by a traditional setup with humanity at the head position. The symbolism was unmistakable. Humanity was no longer asking for a place at the galactic table. They were defining the terms for everyone else. "The age of unrestricted warfare is over," Walsh announced to the assembled delegates. "Species that engage in genocide, slavery, or attacks on civilian populations will face the full response of human military forces. Those who respect the new galactic order will find humanity to be generous allies and trading partners." The Voran delegate raised a tentative hand. "What exactly does this new order entail?" "Simple rules," Walsh replied. "No targeting of civilians, no weapons of mass destruction, no slavery or forced breeding programs. Disputes will be resolved through negotiation or, if necessary, limited military action under human oversight." "And if we refuse to accept these terms?" asked the Altarian representative. Walsh's smile carried the weight of 400 ghost fleet vessels and sleeper agents embedded throughout galactic civilization. "Then you'll discover why the Keth Empire made such a poor decision 6 months ago. The threat was delivered with the same diplomatic courtesy that had characterized human interactions for 50 years. But now everyone understood what lay beneath that polite facade. Humanity had spent half a century positioning themselves to control galactic civilization, and they had done it so skillfully that their enemies had helped them every step of the way. Over the following months, the new galactic order took shape. Species that accepted human leadership found themselves benefiting from advanced technologies and expanded trade opportunities. Those that resisted discovered their own systems turning against them in ways they never expected. The hegemony of SEC attempted to continue their practice of orbital bombardment against civilian targets, only to find their fleet computers refusing to target non-military installations. The raider clans tried to maintain their tradition of piracy, but their ships' navigation systems began routing them directly into human patrol zones. Gradually, the galaxy adapted to the reality that humanity now defined the rules of interstellar civilization. Wars didn't end because species suddenly became peaceful, but because warfare itself had become impossible under human oversight. Dr. Tom Bradley, now openly serving as Director of Xenobiological Security, established research stations throughout the galaxy. These facilities monitored species health, prevented disease outbreaks, and ensured that no civilization developed biological weapons. The same knowledge that could have been used to exterminate alien species was instead deployed to protect them. A year after the failed negotiations on Meridian Point, War Prince Thek was released from human custody. He returned to Keth space. As an advocate for cooperation with humanity, carrying first-hand knowledge of both their military superiority and their moral restraint. They could have destroyed us, he told the Keth Reconstruction Council. They had the weapons, the opportunity, and the justification. Instead, they chose to reform us. That is not the action of conquerors. That is the behavior of a species that truly deserves to lead. Ambassador Walsh stood once again in the diplomatic quarter of Meridian Point Station, but now he walked among species that understood exactly what humanity represented. The galaxy's most dangerous predators had revealed themselves as its most benevolent guardians. The transformation was complete. For 50 years, humanity had played the role of peaceful newcomers to galactic civilization. They had been the perfect students, learning from more advanced species while contributing their own innovations to the common good. But they had also been preparing for the day when someone would mistake their kindness for weakness. The Keth Empire had provided that test, and humanity had passed with devastating efficiency. Now the galaxy lived under a new reality. Peace enforced not through fear, but through the certain knowledge that aggression would be met with overwhelming, precisely targeted response. Humanity had become what they had always claimed to be, peacemakers. They had just never mentioned that they were willing to enforce that peace through superior firepower and strategic brilliance. The most lethal species in the galaxy had chosen to use their lethality in service of protection rather than conquest. It was, perhaps, the most human decision they could have made.